Next business task. You have to know what a report narrative is all about. What are the three functions of a well-written report narrative? And a narrative is like your set of sentences that describes your observations. Click the link to learn about the three functions of a report narrative. One function is to provide accurate information about the condition of the property that you inspected. And there can be some results in that description. It could result in financial damage. The buyer or seller spends money needlessly. There's inspector liability. The inspector may be liable for the financial damages, including those stemming from injury or death, if she describes the condition in a way which the narrative fails to protect. It could be harm to the inspector's reputation in business, and it could result in continued existence of a dangerous situation. There are many people reading your inspection reports, so the narratives must be designed in such a way that people with different motivations and perspectives come to the same conclusion after reading it. So you have to be accurate in reporting your observations. Second function is the assessment of the condition's severity. This is a hot topic, I would say. Just because you described your observation doesn't mean your client knows whether or not it's a problem, or if it's a small problem or a big problem. Sometimes I would put in my report that something is good. I would write an observation like the bathroom receptacle is protected by a GFCI. I realized that a lot of my clients, first-time home buyers, wouldn't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, so I would have to actually write out a little bit more and just say, good, this is a good thing, right? Because they didn't understand the condition's severity. So clearly describing a defective condition may not tell the narrative reader how serious that condition is. And as an inspector, you may find a serious defect which you know could be very expensive to correct, or which might be very dangerous. And the reader may not know enough about homes to understand the gravity of the situation. So consider this narrative. Flashings of the walkways was improperly installed and should be corrected by a qualified contractor. Well, turns out a few years after the inspection report was read, about $100,000 was needed to fix the deck that surrounded a property. So the severity wasn't really communicated in that one simple sentence that described the observation. It was accurate. Remember, that's the top function. First function is being accurate, but it didn't describe the severity. And in the Home Inspection Standards of Practice, there is one type of defect that is defined, and that's material defect. And that is the defect that can really have an adverse impact on the value of the home or pose an unreasonable risk to someone's safety. The third function of a narrative is to transfer liability. When a home inspector performs an inspection, that inspector assumes liability, meaning that the inspector assumes responsibility for the accuracy of the information provided and for actions, events, or conditions which may result from the condition about which the inspector is commenting. This function, third function of a report narrative, is to pass on this liability to the client. This won't be necessary with a narrative which describes a condition requiring no action by the client, such as the electrical main disconnect is labeled 200 amps. But if there's a defect that requires action, like correction that's needed, such as conductors at the service drop in contact with tree branches, liability should be passed on by transferring that responsibility for action to the client. So you always want to recommend a qualified contractor. For example, the overhead service drop conductors had inadequate clearance from the tree branches. This condition may result in abrasion and damage to the wires. That's nice, that's accurate, that's severity. The inspector recommends correction by a qualified contractor. Perfect. You push that liability to someone else. Always recommend that a defect is fixed by a qualified contractor, for example, and also prior to closing. So in my inspection agreement, which can be customized to fit your needs, I had my client agree that all recommendations made by the inspection report be attended to prior to closing. Because sometimes they'll say things like, well, we can't negotiate upon this, and can't get the seller, can't force the seller to fix anything, and I'm not going to be able to do it for a while, and the money and all that stuff, so we'll just handle it later. But if the severity of the condition was accurately described as something very serious, really high severity, could really hurt somebody or needs to be attended to, it's a big structural defect, well, I told my client, and they also agreed, that they would attend to it before they move in. Home inspection report samples, we have a page. We visited this before in the masterclass. We have a bunch of sample reports. You can go in there. You have permission to use the reports to inspire you, to base, to use as an example, something to build from, copy paste from. So you're free to use anything in those reports that would help you with your narratives.